Okay, if you remember, the Cole-Thompson 50-50 rule is that every great image is comprised of 50% composition and 50% processing. So we're going to turn our attention to the processing. So what do you need to get started? It's actually extremely simple. I use a computer, a tablet, and a copy of Photoshop, and that's it. No extra plugins, no extra programs, no special converting programs, just those three items. And we're going to show you how to use Photoshop very simply, because anybody who's used it before knows how intimidating it is. It's got thousands of features and it actually intimidates me. But we're only going to use a few to get great images. And if you look at any of the images on my website, every one was produced with a PC, a tablet, and a copy of Photoshop. Now let's get started with the first image. Let's pick a simple one. Let's choose this one. It's very simple. This is a shot of the contrails peeking over the mountaintop. And if you'll remember, we used a polarizer to bring out those clouds. Now this is a raw file, and even though we shot in black and white mode, our image is in color. And we want it that way because we want to be the ones to process it into black and white, not the camera. So the first thing I do is I look at the histogram and I look at the densities. And this looks pretty good as is. So probably the only thing I'm going to do is increase the blacks and see if that helps improve my sky. It does. It kind of makes it a bit more dramatic. That's all we're going to do to it in the raw converter. Let's open it up. Now here we have it in Photoshop. And the first thing we're going to do is convert it to black and white. This is a very simple process in Photoshop, and there's really two ways to do it depending on which version of Photoshop that you have. If you have an older version that does not have a black and white converter, and there it is, then you can use, up in the same area, the channel mixer. And it's basically the same thing with fewer color channels to convert it with. In either case, it works the same way. Since I do have that black and white converter, let's use it. It converts the image and defaults to certain positions on each slider, but we're going to play with each one, starting with the red, to see if it affects the image. And what we're really looking to do is highlight those clouds, bring them out a little bit more. A red channel really doesn't do anything in this image. Neither does the yellow. Green won't, because we have no green in there. So let's start messing with the blue. See what that does? This is the cyan and how it darkens the image. So we're going to apply just a little bit. I'd like to note right now that the blue channels do two things. They generally will darken an image, but they do introduce noise. Now for my images, I like a lot of noise, and it's usually a part of my image. But for many of you, be careful, the blue channel will introduce noise. See, we can bring that almost black. That's a little bit much. And then we have magenta, and that also didn't do much there. So that's about where we're going to take this image. Now we're going to hit OK. And we're really pretty close to where I want that image right now. Let's take a look at that histogram. You can see that I've got good blacks. That's this area down here. But I don't have any true whites in the image. The graph does not touch the far right, indicating I do not have any true whites. So what we're going to do, we're going to go up to Adjustments and Levels. And we're going to take this right slider, which is our white point, and just slide it over so that it touches the first point of that graph. Now that ensures that we do have a good true white. And on the left we have a good true black. I can slide it further, which will make the image even darker. Now the middle point controls our midtones. And we can, not changing the black point or white point, we can make this image lighter or darker. So that's about where we're going to take that. Hit OK. Now we're really very close. The only thing I'd like to do to this image, it's a little off balance. I've got a lot more highlights on the right than I do the left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the burn tool. I'm going to take midtones at about 3%. And I'm just going to tame down these clouds on the right just a little bit to bring out that detail. And on the right, I'm going to use the dodge tool. And I'm going to use the midtones again, and maybe at about 5%. And I'm going to bring up these clouds on the right. And I work, it sometimes defaults at about 25 or 50% on these dodging burning tools. I always work at 2, 3, 4, or 5%. And I work very slowly. If you work too quickly, you'll get uneven results. And I'd say we're about there. I think that we have a final image of our contrail shot. Now you always want to save that off as a TIFF or a PSD. And we'll just call this contrails. The reason we don't want to save it as a JPEG is because that uses compression and it degrades the image each time you open it and save it again. So there, our very first image. It's a very simple one. We introduced the concept of using Channel Mixer or the black and white conversion tool in Photoshop. We did a minimal amount of dodging and burning, and we used our histogram and levels to ensure that we had true blacks and whites. Now if you look at our histogram right now, looks pretty good. Now we're going to talk about printing later, but I'll give you a little preview. If we were to print this image right now, it would be a little flat, even though it looks great on screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the brightness and contrast, and we're going to adjust that a little bit. And we're not going to use legacy, because if we used legacy, it's an older version of contrast adjustment. As we adjusted contrast, we would blow out our highlights or really block up our shadows. This new version allows us to change it, but it doesn't change those black or white points. So we're just going to increase that contrast a little bit, about 45 right there. I'm going by eye. Hit OK. And now that's going to have a lot more pop, so it looks good when you print the image. And that's it for this one.